Trump and allies working on plan to expunge impeachments. That's the headline. So basically a resolution that would void the 2 impeachments from his first term. Now, it's symbolic, right? It's symbolic if it happens. It's not like it suddenly goes away, but that they would do that. What's your reaction to that? That they could possibly have the votes to do that symbolically?
I'll let Sean handle the logistics of that and whether that's going to happen, but I'll just speak to sort of the politics of it. This is what Trump cares about. I have been saying this for months. He doesn't give a crap about the midterms. He doesn't care about the health of the Republican Party. He doesn't care about the majority. He doesn't care at all. It's obvious. He cares about this. He cares about putting his face on the money, his name on the buildings, his legacy. And if that means pretending he wasn't impeached twice, I guess that will satisfy him in his old age. But this is not what Americans care about.
It's also meaningless. It's a meaningless vote in the House of Representatives. The historical record is clear why he was impeached. Both were justified and important.
Hey everyone, John here, and we're rolling again. 32 judges nationwide have demanded Trump's immediate removal would be the most extraordinary political development in modern history if true. Nothing like a coordinated judicial revolt against a sitting president has ever happened in the United States. The claim is dramatic, but its accuracy is unverified. But here's the truth, and I want to get this out there right away because I genuinely don't like wasting your time on things that aren't real. There is no verified group of 32 judges, federal or state, that has demanded Trump's removal from office. None. Zero. No collective letter with actual signatures you can verify. No judicial order with a docket number you can look up. No official action from any judicial conference or court system. Nothing. Once you start digging into where claims like this actually originate,
and they ran their course.
But it's interesting that this is how he's taking the time.
But he's being
briefed on this. He's taking the time. The
but
time
he's
is going into this.
Not thinking ahead. Because if he really wants to pursue this, all the reasons he was impeached get dredged up again, and we're all talking about it around a midterm election. Like, what are you thinking?
It doesn't erase the fact that he was the only president impeached twice. It doesn't erase the fact that now the American people will remember that he was impeached twice. And it doesn't do anything for his party. It doesn't do anything to bring down costs. It is only for one purpose, and that is his ego.
Man, look,
so if I were a Republican,
this is the best,
I'd just be pissed.
This is the best idea Donald Trump's had in a very long time. And I think that everyone around the table needs to make sure that Donald Trump, I know you're watching us right now, but please, let's go down this path. I mean, you deserve to have this argument in front of the American people about your impeachments. In fact, I want us to have this discussion in North Carolina. I wanted to have it in Ohio, maybe Maine, Texas, if we're getting a little freaky. We want to make sure that we have this discussion in front of the American public, because as we go down,
you begin noticing a very clear and consistent pattern. This exact same story keeps appearing over and over again, just with the number changed each time. 29 judges one month, 32 the next, 37 the time after that. The number keeps shifting because there's never been an actual list behind it. It's just a made-up figure that sounds official and specific enough to make people believe it without questioning it. Think about that for a moment, because it's actually a really telling detail. If a documented group of 32 judges had genuinely issued a formal demand like this, that number wouldn't keep changing from video to video and post to post. You'd expect to see the exact same number every single time, because a real list of signatories doesn't fluctuate depending on who's reposting the story.
The lack of self-awareness, this is right up there with something Donald Trump should smile about tonight.
Political assassination by the Democrats on President Trump. They have Trump derangement syndrome. They had fake impeachments on President Trump.
What are we even talking about?
He would like his impeachments to be expunged from the record. I don't blame him. It's his legacy. And he's been a target of the Democrats over and over. In fact, they said if they take back the House, they're going to immediately impeach him again. Like, enough is enough. This is so distracting to the American people.
I just want to be clear. Expunging impeachments is not a thing.
It's
not a thing.
I had to ask the question. I don't even know if it's possible, so I didn't want to go down that path.
One thing is there's a thing that's in the Constitution, and it is that you can impeach a president. The thing that's not in the Constitution, or anywhere else for that matter, is expunging an impeachment. So this, I mean, to call it symbolic, I think is almost even overstating the thing. It seems like, frankly, a waste of time or just a.
But it does change constantly. 29 here, 32 there, 41 the next time around. That inconsistency alone tells you everything you need to know about how solid this claim actually is. Here's something even more fundamental that this whole headline completely ignores. And honestly, it's the most important fact in this entire discussion. Judges cannot legally remove a president from office. That's not their role. It's not in their constitutional job description. The separation of powers was designed precisely to prevent any one branch of government from unilaterally removing leadership from another branch. Judges can rule that specific executive actions violate the Constitution or break federal law.
A transparent play to make Trump feel good on a particular day, what's the point?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you want to use the word symbolic or not, but it's a political statement to say that this wasn't fair when it happened, and you have different political actors who are making a different statement. My view is the impeachments were, I don't know if expunged is the right word, but they were obliterated or done away with when he beat the rap in the Senate. I mean, he was never convicted on any of the charges.
Same thing Bill Clinton said.
Well, and they never. We adjudicated this already, and the political analysis I think is correct. Would be hard to pass. I did interview a member of Congress the other day, Darrell Issa of California. I think has filed legislation to do this. I think it has a number of co-sponsors. Look, I think it would attract a lot of Republican votes, but would it attract all the Republican votes or enough Republican votes? I don't know the answer to that. I agree with Carla. I think if the Democrats take back the House, these old impeachments will be the least of anybody's concerns because they'll move on another one immediately.
But do you think it's a helpful message going into the midterms that you're talking about impeachment as like a thing?
I don't know. You tell me. The people running for Congress in your party are talking about it every day.
No, actually are.
Absolutely.
Actually, they are.
That happens constantly in courts across the country under every administration in modern history. But actually removing a sitting president from office, that power belongs exclusively to Congress through the impeachment process. Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution makes this crystal clear. The president can be removed only through impeachment by the House and conviction by the Senate, even if a huge group of judges issued some kind of dramatic public statement demanding Trump's removal. That statement still wouldn't have any legal authority to actually remove anybody from office. It's simply not a power judges possess, no matter how many of them might agree on something.
Talking every day about lowering costs. That's what they're talking about.
You well know that when asked directly, most Democrats say Donald Trump should be impeached again.
Most Democrats who are running for Congress have said that Trump should be impeached again.
You would be hard-pressed, I think, to find a Democrat who would go on the record and say, you know what? No. What they do say is everything he does is illegal, everything he does is unconstitutional, everything he does is worthy of some sort of
Well, that's because
punishment.
the courts have said
So
it's
if you tell your
unconstitutional.
if you tell your base that, if you tell your base
said a lot
that,
of what he is doing
they'll
is
expect you to act on it.
No, that's what
Can you
they're
guarantee
talking,
right now they won't impeach him?
They're talking.
You can't.
I think
we
that-
also don't know what Donald Trump's going to do between the last 2 years.
I think that the American public also see the grift that is Donald Trump and Donald Trump Inc. and the Trump family and Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr. I think that they see
changing the subject.
No.
He wants to impeach him.
No, what I'm saying is the American public. Right now, we're talking about Trump's impeachment for his legacy.
You want to talk about President Biden and that grift? He was on the take from every major adversary.
First of all, what? All right, let's all back up. Let's just be extremely clear.
Now, is there real genuine tension between courts and the Trump administration right now? Actually, yes, there genuinely is. And it's honestly a pretty interesting story on its own merits without needing any exaggeration. Reporters have tracked this and found 75 separate lower court cases during this term, where judges ruled that the administration had infringed on First Amendment interests, meaning free speech and related constitutional protections. That's 75 cases. It's a real significant number that tells you something meaningful about how courts have been responding to various administration actions. But here's the crucial distinction that this fake headline completely fails to acknowledge. Those are 75 separate cases decided by different courts addressing different specific government actions. That is not the same thing as 32 judges jointly signing some kind of collective demand for Trump's removal. Not even close. The two concepts are structurally completely different. One is the judicial system, working exactly as it's designed to work. reviewing individual cases and ruling on specific government actions. The other is a fictional, coordinated political movement that never actually happened. And honestly, that number of 75 separate cases deserves to be understood on its own terms without any exaggeration attached to it. That's a genuinely substantial pattern, spread across many different courts and many different specific policy disputes, all touching on First Amendment protections in one way or another. That kind of pattern tells you something real about the volume of legal challenges this particular administration has faced. It's the kind of story that's actually interesting enough to stand entirely on its own without needing to be twisted into a fake coordinated removal narrative just to grab attention. So in this breakdown, we're going to dig deeper into what these real First Amendment rulings actually involve and why 75 separate court decisions doesn't add up to some coordinated removal demand. We're going to talk about real specific rulings, like the one involving the FBI headquarters relocation and the real legal fight over sanctions in Trump's IRS lawsuit. Both of those keep getting mixed into this fake removal narrative when they have absolutely nothing to do with presidential removal. And we're going to walk through one more time exactly what it would take, constitutionally speaking, for a sitting president to actually be removed from office. By the end of this, you're going to understand exactly what's real, what's fake, and why this same fake judges demand removal story keeps getting recycled with a different number attached every single time. Let's slow everything down and actually go through it piece by piece, because there's a lot of real legal substance buried underneath this fake dramatic headline. And I want you to walk away from this knowing exactly what's true and what's made up. Let's start with that 75 case number, because I think this is genuinely the single most important real thread in this whole story. And it deserves way more attention than the fake headline gives it. Journalists did real reporting, tracking lower court cases during Trump's second term, and they found 75 separate instances where judges ruled that the administration had infringed on First Amendment interests. Think about what that actually means. 75 different lawsuits in different courts involving different specific government actions, all resulting in rulings that found some kind of free speech or related constitutional problem with what the administration had done. That's a real meaningful pattern worth paying attention to on its own terms. Let's really sit with the scale of that number for a second. 75 is genuinely a lot of separate legal proceedings. Each one of those cases involved its own plaintiffs, its own specific facts, its own judge or panel of judges carefully reviewing the particular government action being challenged. That's not a small, isolated pattern. That's a substantial, sustained wave of legal challenges spread across the court system, addressing all kinds of different First Amendment concerns, from restrictions on speech to questions about press access to various other free expression issues that have come up during this term. But here's exactly where this fake headline twists things. This distinction is the whole crux of today's discussion. 75 separate court cases decided by 75 different judicial proceedings addressing 75 different specific government actions. That is fundamentally different from 32 judges jointly signing some kind of coordinated collective political demand. It's the difference between 75 different doctors and 75 different hospitals treating 75 different patients for 75 different injuries versus 75 doctors getting together and signing one joint letter demanding some specific policy change. Both involve doctors doing real work, but they're structurally completely different things. Courts ruling against specific administration actions case by case based on the specific facts and law in each individual lawsuit. That's actually the judicial system working exactly the way it's designed to work. It's not evidence of some coordinated political movement among judges. When courts find constitutional problems with specific government actions, they're doing their jobs. They're applying the law to the facts before them. They're not engaged in some grand conspiracy to remove a president from office. Now let's talk about some of the specific real cases that probably get mixed into this fake removal narrative, because understanding them individually really helps show how disconnected they actually are from any kind of collective removal demand. One recent ruling barred the Trump administration from scrapping a planned relocation of FBI headquarters to Maryland. Think about what that actually is. That's a specific ruling about a specific federal administrative project involving where a government building ends up being located. It's a real legal dispute with real consequences for that particular project, but it has absolutely nothing to do with Trump's presidency itself or his eligibility to hold office or removal in any sense. It's a ruling about a building relocation plan. Full stop. This specific case is a great example of exactly the kind of mundane, but genuinely real government dispute that gets swept up into these fake headlines simply because it involves a court ruling against the administration. Where a federal agency's headquarters ends up being physically located is actually a real substantive administrative and legal question involving budget considerations, property decisions, and procedural requirements the government has to follow. It's a legitimate story on its own. It just has zero connection to anything resembling presidential removal. Let's talk about another real thread that keeps getting mixed in here too. The ongoing situation involving Trump's massive $10 billion lawsuit against the Internal Revenue Service. Trump has been trying to pause sanctions that were imposed on him and his lawyers in connection with that specific case. Now, sanctions in a legal context basically means a court imposing some kind of penalty or consequence related to how a case was conducted, maybe for procedural issues, maybe for how arguments were made, that kind of thing. That's a real case-specific legal development tied to one particular lawsuit Trump himself initiated against the IRS. But again, case-specific sanctions in one lawsuit are not an impeachment proceeding. They don't grant any court the power to remove a sitting president. It's a completely separate legal mechanism operating within one specific case with zero connection to the constitutional impeachment process. It's worth pointing out just how specific and narrowly technical this whole sanctions dispute actually is when you look closely at it. This isn't some broad ruling about Trump's fitness for office. It's a narrow procedural dispute about how a specific lawsuit, one that Trump himself filed against the IRS, was actually conducted. Courts impose sanctions in all kinds of lawsuits involving all kinds of parties all the time, usually related to things like discovery disputes, filing deadlines, or how arguments were presented. It's a completely normal part of litigation, and it's nowhere close to the kind of extraordinary constitutional level action that would be required to actually remove a sitting president from office. And let's touch on the Carroll case one more time too, because it seems to show up in a lot of these fake removal narratives, probably because it's a real ongoing legal threat involving Trump personally. The Supreme Court recently rejected Trump's effort to reopen the $5 million E. Jean Carroll civil verdict, which means that judgment stays exactly as it was. That's a real documented legal outcome. But notice that's the Supreme Court declining to revisit a civil judgment, a lawsuit between private parties over damages. It has nothing to do with Trump's eligibility to hold office, and it definitely doesn't provide any kind of pathway for judges to remove him from the presidency. It's simply the court letting an existing civil verdict stand as is. That distinction between a civil judgment and any kind of removal action is worth repeating one more time here because it comes up over and over in these kinds of fake headlines. Civil lawsuits involve private parties seeking damages. They don't touch a person's eligibility to hold public office. Criminal and constitutional removal processes are entirely separate legal categories, governed by completely different rules and completely different institutions. The Carroll verdict staying in place tells you Trump lost a specific civil case, and the judgment against him remains valid. That's it, nothing more. Nothing about his presidency itself. Now here's something worth mentioning too, because it actually flips the entire premise of this fake headline in a genuinely interesting way. There's a real judicial vacancy that recently opened up when U.S. Circuit Judge Bobby Shepard announced he's leaving active service on the 8th Circuit. Think about what that actually represents. When a federal judge steps back from active service, that creates an opening. a vacancy that the sitting president gets to fill through nomination. So this is actually an opportunity for Trump, a chance to nominate someone for that seat, not some kind of coordinated protest against him. If anything, this development runs in exactly the opposite direction from what the fake headline would suggest. It's not evidence of judges organizing against Trump. It's literally an example of Trump gaining more influence over the judiciary through a completely normal, routine personnel change. This is how the system is designed to work. Presidents nominate judges. The Senate confirms them. Vacancies get filled. It's been happening this way for over 2 centuries. So when you put all of this together, here's the actual full picture forming. You have a real significant pattern of 75 separate First Amendment-related rulings against various specific Trump administration actions, which is genuinely worth understanding as its own meaningful story about how courts have been responding to policy decisions. You have a real specific ruling about the FBI headquarters relocation, completely unrelated to Trump's presidency itself. You have a real case-specific sanctions dispute tied to Trump's own IRS lawsuit with zero connection to impeachment or removal. You have the Supreme Court letting a real civil verdict against Trump personally stand as is, which also has nothing to do with his eligibility for office. And you have a real judicial vacancy opening up that actually benefits Trump, giving him a nomination opportunity rather than representing some kind of coordinated judicial uprising. Take all of these completely real, completely separate threads, and somehow they've been smashed together into a fake headline claiming 32 judges jointly demanded Trump's immediate removal. It's the classic misinformation playbook in action. Take multiple unrelated real events, combine them with a fictional narrative, attach a specific sounding number, and present it as breaking news. The number changes, the details shift, but the underlying trick remains exactly the same. Let's move into part 3, because I want to break this down carefully into clean points and really nail down exactly why this fake claim falls apart so completely once you actually look at what the judicial branch can and can't legally do. Once you lay it all out clearly, this whole 32 judges story just kind of collapses under its own weight. Judges simply do not have the constitutional power to remove a sitting president. That's not a gray area. That's not up for interpretation. That's just how the separation of powers actually works in this country. Judges can rule that specific executive actions violate the Constitution or federal law. That's their job. That's what courts are designed to do. And it happens constantly across every administration. But actual removal from office, that power belongs exclusively to Congress through the formal impeachment process. Even if, hypothetically, some enormous group of judges really did issue some kind of dramatic, coordinated public statement demanding Trump's removal. And again, that hasn't actually happened here. It still wouldn't carry any legal weight whatsoever, because judges simply don't hold that specific constitutional power, no matter how strongly worded their statement might be. Think about the entire structure of the American government for a second. 3 separate branches, each with their own specific, clearly defined powers. Precisely so, no single branch can just unilaterally decide to remove leadership from another branch on its own. Let's really nail down and carefully explain why 75 separate court cases doesn't equal 32 judges jointly demanding removal. This distinction is honestly the entire heart of today's debunk. Each of those 75 First Amendment cases involved its own specific lawsuit, its own specific facts, its own specific government action being challenged, and its own individual judge or panel of judges ruling on that particular case. That's the normal routine functioning of the judicial system. Courts reviewing specific government actions as they come up, case by case, exactly as the system is designed to work. That is fundamentally different from some kind of organized collective political action where a defined group of judges gets together and issues one joint demand about a president's fitness for office. One is the judiciary doing its actual job. The other, the thing this fake headline claims happened, would be judges stepping dramatically outside their constitutional role into pure political activism. And there's simply no evidence that's occurred. It's honestly the difference between 75 different traffic tickets issued by 75 different officers on 75 different streets versus those same officers getting together to sign one joint statement about who should run the police department. Let's talk about why. The real story here, the actual documented pattern of adverse rulings against various administration policies, matters far more than this fake collective removal narrative ever could. 75 First Amendment-related rulings against different administration actions. That's a genuinely significant number, and it tells you something real about how courts have been reviewing this administration's policies. That pattern is worth understanding on its own terms. It reflects genuine, ongoing legal disputes over specific government actions and constitutional protections working their way through the normal judicial process exactly as intended. That's the story worth your attention and your understanding, not a fictional coordinated removal demand that doesn't actually exist anywhere in verified reporting. In whichever direction future rulings go, whether courts continue finding First Amendment problems with specific actions or start ruling more favorably for the administration, that ongoing pattern is going to keep shaping real legal precedent for years, regardless of who occupies the presidency at any given moment. Why does this exact recurring judges demand removal story keep resurfacing again and again, with the number just changing each time? Honestly, it's the same pattern we keep seeing across all these fake political headlines. Take something real and substantial happening in the background, courts ruling against various administration actions in this case, and repackage it with a big, dramatic, specific-sounding number attached to make it feel like verified, urgent breaking news. 29 judges, 32 judges, whatever round number sounds official enough that particular week. The specific number changes, but the underlying trick stays exactly the same. Borrow the real credibility of actual judicial rulings and use it to sell a completely fictional collective political action that never actually happened. Once you start recognizing that specific pattern, borrowing real credibility to sell a fake collective claim, it honestly becomes a lot easier to spot the next version of this exact same trick before you ever click share on it yourself. So here's where things actually stand right now. There is no verified group of 32 judges demanding Trump's immediate removal from office. What is real is a genuinely significant pattern of 75 separate First Amendment-related court rulings against various specific Trump administration actions, tracked and documented by real reporting. What is also real is a specific court ruling blocking the FBI headquarters relocation plan, a specific sanctions dispute tied to Trump's own IRS lawsuit, and the Supreme Court letting the Carroll civil verdict stand. 3 completely separate legal developments, none of which involve removing Trump from office in any way. And what's also real, and honestly flips the entire premise of the fake headline, is a new judicial vacancy that actually gives Trump a fresh nomination opportunity, not evidence of judges organizing against him. When you actually sit with everything we've covered today, what emerges is a much more accurate and honestly much more interesting picture of how the judicial branch is genuinely functioning right now. Courts continue reviewing specific administration actions case by case, ruling for and against different policies based on the actual facts and law involved in each individual dispute. That's the judicial system working exactly the way it's supposed to, providing a real, meaningful check on executive power without ever crossing into the kind of political removal action that's constitutionally reserved for Congress alone. And honestly, that pattern of First Amendment rulings is genuinely the real story worth continuing to follow here, because it tells you something meaningful about how courts are reviewing this administration's actions across a whole range of different policies. As more of these cases work their way through the system, and as more rulings come down one way or another, that's going to keep shaping the actual legal landscape in real documented ways, way more than any fake collective removal demand ever could. There's also a real question worth watching about how these cases play out on appeal, since lower court rulings don't always get the final word, and some of these 75 cases could still see reversals or further developments as they move through higher courts. The claim of 32 judges demanding Trump's removal is fake. The judiciary has no constitutional role in removal, which belongs solely to Congress via impeachment. The real story is courts reviewing administration actions case by case. And that's where the genuine legal action is happening.